Yo guys, I'm Dunmere. I'm a rank 1 peak Supervive player and I have almost 1,000 hours playing the game so far. So with that, I'm going to give you guys a Zeph guide. Hope you guys enjoy it.
Let's discuss Zeph's strengths and weaknesses, starting with the strengths. Zeph is a character chock full of distinct strengths, and while there are some other characters that can compete for his position on a team in a meta sense, he is more than capable. So to get into these strengths, we'll start with his first one, which is his amazing sustain capability. Zeph's healing capability is excellent, as both his ultimate and healing blast heal for quite impressive numbers, but also can apply to all allies if cleaved correctly, and he can even heal himself with his healing blast on top of this. But a good Zeph player can unlock even more healing potential, as he has mechanics to regain heal uses baked into his kit. So while he can be just a heal bot, he can become an even more powerful heal bot when piloted by a good player. Yet his sustain doesn't end there, as he also has a powerful capability to revive allies. His tornado dash gives him an excellent option to move ally wisps to resable locations, dramatically reducing the risk to pick up an ally and therefore also dramatically increases the chance this will occur. In addition, his ultimate can allow for sneaky reses on distant allies too, as it does apply a passive resurrection effect on wisps it passes over. Sure, enemies can stop it by standing on top of the wisp after, but it still will allow some extra reses that otherwise would not occur. However, Zeph doesn't just end as a heal bot though, as his second strength is excellent damage output. While his primary fire alone isn't the best for damage, it does go a distance that will outrange most characters. He also has a very powerful nade that allows for excellent damage combos, setting up enemies for more primary fires while also allowing huge AoE damage from his ultimate. Even more, if you land a primary mark on your enemies before casting the ult, it'll deal extra damage. And since the ultimate cleaves through walls while being quite wide and fast, you can secure kills on any enemy that gets low. This morphs into Zeph's third primary strength, which is that he has excellent ability to peel allies. This is partially because of the powerful crowd control that also assists his kill potential, and partially because of the ability of his tornado dash to reposition his whole team. So either he's chunking enemies with his nade or ult to turn what enemies thought was a free kill into your ally escaping, or he's peeling his disadvantaged team back to heal them up for a later re-engage. Yet despite Zeph's excellent set of strengths, he is not perfect. So here are his weaknesses. Zeph's weaknesses root around him being very positioning dependent. Specifically, though his tornado dash is a quite powerful team utility, it doesn't allow Zeph the absolute best ability to move himself around, mostly because of the distance it goes. In addition, it also requires a channel time, needing even more to go max distance. This limitation means that Zeph must play in a bit more of a reserved way, especially against highly mobile enemies, and definitely must always be considering his positioning very carefully, or he'll risk getting stunned mid-tornado channel or just chased down. This can often force him into having to do some awkward things, like looking to leave fights a bit early to increase his chance of getting a res, or can force him into playing outside of the ideal range he'd like to in the first place. And also, while attempting to chase down enemies, this can cause him to struggle to catch up to the more mobile members of Supervive's cast. So with the strengths and weaknesses over, let's talk about how to actually play Zeph. Zeph plays best as a backline supporter, focusing on pumping out the heals while watching for important triggers that he can follow up with his utility, such as getting huge stuns with nade onto enemies that are quite grouped up, peeling an ally that gets stunned or stuck too deep with, taking low allies and wisps away to safety with his tornado dash. Zeph is great at keeping his team up and punishing enemies when fights get hectic, so if he sticks to distance and watches for good opportunities, then he'll either sustain his teams to a win, or simply crush his enemies. So with that as an overview of strategy, let's get into specifics on his abilities. To use Zeph's primary fire best, you'll want to stick to full charge blasts. Focus on lining yourself up so you can cleave multiple enemies at once, and definitely focus on hitting enemies you've marked. This will let you refresh the mark while also slightly reducing your heal R&B cooldown. You can go for shorter charges if you desperately need to get your charge back up faster, get a mark on someone, or finish off a low target, but you'll get the most value sticking to your max range and chunking out full charge shots. It's also very important to mark targets you plan to hit with your nade or ultimate, as you'll restore one full heal charge per detonated mark. It won't always be possible to do this, but you should definitely be looking for the opportunity. And for an extra tip, Zeph can jump while casting his primary fire to get a substantial knockback that he can use to kite his enemies with. For his heal blast, while it's useful to save a use or two for when an ally gets very low, you'll definitely still want to be using them some relatively early. This doesn't mean to waste them though, but as soon as an ally takes damage that they aren't likely to be able to self-heal, it's good to use one or two. Zeph has multiple different ways to recover his healing blast, so if you're not using them when needed, you also won't be able to recover them extra quickly, or just allow yourself to get full heal blast recovers when detonating marks. Having said that, heal blast will get most value if used on lined or grouped up enemies, so this is the best use case. But you also shouldn't be afraid to use them on yourself, especially if you're taking a particularly risky 1v1. Moreover, if you have your ultimate available, it'll provide the most valuable source of healing and protection to save an ally in a very dangerous position, so don't feel like you absolutely must save your heal blast for this. As for Zeph's grenade, it offers fight-winning utility when used aggressively, so it's definitely a good option to throw when enemies get grouped up. But when you're down your ultimate or tornado dash, or are playing against highly mobile enemies, you'll get great value by saving it for a defensive peel. Its area of effect is not only quite large, but will CC enemies by pulling them in and grounding them. But even if its utility and damage isn't enough, it also will give back a heal blast in a pinch if used on a marked target, which, when being dove onto, shouldn't be hard to get. So get a mark and nade your enemy, and you're likely to not only completely counter the diver, but then be able to out-sustain them with your healing and kill them too. In regards to Zeph's Tornado, it offers excellent utility to pull out allies that are low in HP or in wisp form, but also has impressive offensive uses. Use it to throw your team in for a full dive and they'll be able to get close to the enemy while still having their own dashes to use as they need. This can be quite effective if used into a more ranged composition at the beginning of a fight, or if used to help your team secure a fight they're already winning. But in addition to these uses, it's also great to help chase down the final remaining enemy in a one fight. Catch your chasing ally with it, and they'll often be able to overtake the enemy with their own dash after. Moving on to Zeph's ultimate, it simply is incredibly powerful. It offers excellent frag potential if comboed with a good Zeph nade, allowing a consistent 1v1 win, or even if chugged through walls to catch a fleeing enemy. But it's also insane for defensive uses, as it allows you to peel off enemies on an ally from range. So watch for characters like Kingpin, Brawl, or Jewel that play to stun up an enemy at close range or pull them in, and then toss your ultimate to knock back the enemy attempting to finish an ally they have made vulnerable. Bonus value if you get the ult through your ally also for the extra heal. If a fight has become hectic, you can also toss it onto a wisp knocked in some other area. If the enemies aren't extremely attentive, you'll often secure the res on your ally, who can then come behind them and catch them by surprise. Sometimes, you can even do all of the above, or at least a large portion with only one use of the ult. Now that we have the specifics covered, let's talk about how to apply this into a full playstyle. While Zeph has quite the set of offensive tools, you should default to playing toward the back of your team. This is partially because you are responsible for caretaking your team as Zeph, and because Zeph's abilities are quite long ranged anyway. But it's mostly because the only way Zeph really will lose a fight for his team is if he gets too close to the enemy where they can easily dive him and punish him, before he can tornado away. Sure, Zeph could get 2-tapped by a Shrike or lose some other ranged battle, but this is something that you shouldn't really be experiencing as Zeph regardless, as he doesn't really need to be taking fight exchanges like that. He can just play behind cover while still healing his allies, being capable of ulting through any wall when needed, and also being able to toss his nade over those walls. However, you still do want to look for a ranged poke on Zeph. Not to the extent that you duel and die to a high damage range character, but more so when you outrange or have similar range to your enemies, and can consistently apply your marks. So this results in the default playstyle of sitting back, poking from max range, and healing up allies that get low. But this isn't all that Zeph is. Instead, he has an assortment of other options he can execute, but he needs to be patient, as they aren't something that can be forced, but rather will just come up in the fight as time goes. Try to force them and you'll get very little value and won't have your resources for when the opportunity would have arisen. So what are these opportunities you should be looking for? The first of these is around Zeph's nade. Though it is a very useful defense tool, and I'll talk more at the end about when you should decide to save it, the value you can get from a multi-target nade is quite impressive, so you always want to be looking for these. So to get these to occur, watch your allies on the sides of your team. If they get to beat an enemy that comes to contest them, they'll be able to surround the enemy and pressure them into grouping up. Once they group up, toss that nade. And if you can catch more than 2 enemies or the 2 were already damaged, chuck your ult in to finish them off. The second major opportunity to look for is ult peels. It'll often depend on the enemies you run into as mentioned before, so if there's a hook-based character like Kingpin or Jewel, or there's an assassin character, this is the kind of situation you'll be able to save an ally in. So watch these enemies carefully and look to set yourself up so if they do land a hook or get a stun, you'll be able to hit the enemy and your ally with your ult right after. Last, there is a third opportunity, which is tempo plays with team tornado dashes. By tempo, I mean the flow of the game. As in, you use your tornado dash to pull out allies and ally wisps from danger, or toss your team onto weakened enemies. To do this well, you really want to be thinking about what kind of resources are available. Of course, HP is one of the bigger resources, but if you know the enemy has used big resources like a Seraph heal already, or some ultimates while your team is still up, this can be quite powerful of a trigger to toss your team further in. Just be careful not to toss them over an abyss when unsuspecting, or into guaranteed crowd control. Likewise, you can think about your own team's resources, such as your own available heals, your team's mobility cooldowns, ultimates, and more. Try to get a feel for the flow of the fight and push or pull back based on this. In addition to all this, there are a couple of specifically unique things to consider during gameplay. As mentioned before, one of these is the possible necessity to save your own nade for defense. As mentioned, you usually just want to toss it if the enemy is grouped up, but if you're playing into multiple enemies that have very high mobility and threat, or you've used your dash too close to the enemy, you need to hold it. Your ult availability is definitely something to consider with this too. Just keep in mind that nading someone away and living will result in more nade opportunities later, while tossing it when too vulnerable will require you to get a bunch of value out of it, or you're just gonna die. On top of this, you want to pay a lot of attention to anti-heal. Many characters in Supervive have anti-heal capabilities that will negate your healing. Of course, you need to resist the temptation to toss a heal at an anti-healed ally, but it's more than that also. You should watch my other guides and read through the abilities of all characters so you can learn which abilities have anti-heal. Then you can make smarter decisions about when to use your heals. Like if a heal now will get 50% value only, it might still be better if that ally or yourself is likely to get anti'd right after. Time to kill in this game is very quick, so you often won't be able to heal the target before they are dead or the enemy is dead and you didn't participate in the combat at all.